No issue defined the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump more than the wall. Donald Trump was bad and mad and racist for building that wall. So why is Joe Biden building that wall? Was Trump right, or is Biden a liar, or both? Hello there, you awakening wonders, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us on our quest to truth and freedom. Thank you for supporting us. Once the government steps in to demonetize you and big tech and the government team up to shut down your voice, we obviously need you more than ever. Thank you so much for staying with us. If you want to support us directly, you can here. Remember, we make a show every single day. God be praised, so that we can talk truthfully about the nuance and complexity about cultural life and the possibility of change, of awakening together. And today we're talking about one of the stories that's defined the last couple of years politically, Donald Trump's wall. There was no idea that demonstrated the distinction between Trump and Biden more clearly than the wall. Trump was going to build a beautiful wall, a magnificent wall, and make Mexico pay for it.
Mexico's going to pay for the wall.
Biden and his supporters said it was disgusting that a wall was going to be built at all.
There will not be another foot of wall constructed on my administration.
And yet Biden is continuing to build the wall. So whether or not you think this wall is a good idea, you have to acknowledge that now Biden has said Saudi Arabia will be a pariah. They are not. He won't lead us into a proxy war with Russia. He has done. And now there is going to be a wall. Let's have a look at how the legacy media report on this and see if we can make sense of this extraordinary story in this peculiar, divisive time.
A new effort to build a border wall tonight, coming from an unexpected place. The White House, in an official notice, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas saying there is an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers to prevent unlawful entries into the United States.
Well then, I suppose on that basis, you have to say that Trump was somehow perspicacious and ahead of his time, because the current analysis sounds a lot like Trump's rhetoric, albeit without many of his flourishes. And the counter position was, don't be disgusting, that's racist, you don't need to build a wall, we should welcome immigrants. So this is an extraordinary transition. And in a way, I suppose what it demonstrates, in the same way that the transitioning of positions around vaccines did, that there are no clear values and principles. When Trump was in charge of the vaccine program, you might not remember this because it's sort of been obscured by the tumbling months of deception. Kamala Harris said, I wouldn't take one of those vaccines. And Joe Biden said, how do we know these vaccines are going to be any good? And when their administration took the reins, oh, these vaccines are fantastic. It shows you that the issues themselves are not important. What matters is political expedience. That wall was a defining issue. The opposition to Trump's position on immigration, and in particular the wall, was one of the points of difference. That was one of the things that people were waving flags for, marching for, feeling indulgent in their values about. Well, look, it's happening anyway. So what does that tell us? What does that tell us about the distinction between these two political groups? And what does it tell us, importantly, about the honesty and our ability to trust Biden's administration?
Facing a growing influx of migrants illegally entering the country, the administration is waiving 26 federal laws in order to allow more wall construction.
What about those laws? They're just being waived. Do you start to feel that you live in a nihilistic space where the interests of the powerful will be pursued regardless of preconditions? Remember the pandemic period, how many customs, rules just fell away. The word science was used to mean just be obedient. Everything is flipping, reversing, traversing. I think many of us have a sense of impending and even present crisis. And this is one of those stories that points to that. Like, unless Biden's done a speech somewhere where he said something like this, I know we vehemently opposed the building of Trump's wall during the election cycle. In fact, we openly mocked it, ridiculed it, and used it to make Trump seem like a ridiculous racist. Well, we're building that wall now, and here's why. Unless there's been that kind of a speech, this is another one of those examples, like the laptop, like the evident involvement in the business dealings, allegedly, like botched Afghanistan, like not making Saudi Arabia a pariah but embracing them, that shows you, like the claims about the farmer. We beat Big Pharma this year, then a sort of mealy-mouthed, half-arsed bunch of legislation. I suppose what we're offering you on this channel is they're not going to do anything to help you. They're just going to say what they need to say. And the legacy media will amplify, mitigate their message, normalize their changes. Meanwhile, we seem to be ignoring the fact that the world is falling apart around us, that there is a radical requirement for systemic change. Decentralization decentralization, real democracy, a radical review of all of our institutions, probably the banishment and abandonment of many of those institutions, and we're sort of just watching this spectacle unfold. Are you starting to feel that this is getting pretty serious? Let me know in the chat, let me know in the comments.
Using money allocated before President Biden took office. It's a sharp policy shift for a president who once called a wall spanning the southern border a waste of time.
Now, notice NBC's propagandist position in the phrase sharp policy shift.
It's a sharp policy shift.
Oh, that's good. He did a sharp policy shift because he's so sharp and quick. Look at him. Boom, boom, shifting policy sharply. If that had been Trump, it would have been Trump lied. Trump lied. He told a lie. He said he was going to do this, then he did that. That's not a sharp policy shift. That's a lie. It exposes either ineptitude or total deception. Which is it?
The new construction will be along a stretch of border in Starr County, Texas. And tonight, former President Trump, who built his successful 2016 presidential campaign around a promise to build a border wall, is claiming vindication.
How can he not? If your policy that was vilified in opposition, if ridiculed in administration, is continued after an election loss, how can you go, well, hold on a minute, didn't you guys say that you would never do this under any circumstances and now you're just doing it? It astonishes me.
Tonight, a major reversal. The Biden administration announcing it is waiving 26 federal laws to permit more border wall construction in southern Texas, amid a record 3 million migrants crossing the border in the past year. The head of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, overnight declaring there is presently an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers and roads to prevent illegal crossings in Starr County, Texas. But President Biden today appeared to contradict his own DHS secretary.
Do you believe the border wall works?
No.
There's no actual cohesion, is there? Is this it? Is this the evidence of things falling apart? Middle Eastern wars amplifying, European wars increasing, a sense of total detachment, absolute loss of trust in institutions, a president building a wall and saying, what wall? It's extraordinary. I feel that in a way we're just sort of standing blithely on the shores of Armageddon, watching it unfold. I don't know what it's going to take to activate us sometimes.
Insisting his administration is not building more wall because of the surge in migrants, but because they were required by law to spend money Congress allocated during the Trump administration.
They say two things are inevitable in life, don't they? Death and taxes, and Biden's lies. Taxes, though, are inevitable. The IRS October the 15th deadline is just days away. The attorneys at Tax Network USA have saved clients over, get this, $1 billion in tax debts. So whether you're in the hole for $10,000 or $10 million in debt, they are ready to help you. Even if you haven't filed in a year, 5 years, or a whole decade, they're ready to secure the best settlement for you. So go to taxnetworkusa.com/brand before the clock runs out. Give yourself a promise that's kept, unlike the current administration. Okay.
They have to use the money for what was appropriate. I can't stop that.
There's no way through that makes sense, because if he can't stop it, what was the point in all of the pledges? Why bother having elections at all if you can't reverse, impede, alter the trajectory? Isn't the campaign entirely based on change? They're doing this, we're going to do that. He's building a wall, we're not going to build a wall. We're better than them. Oh, I can't do anything about that. Even the stance on Big Pharma, oh, we've managed to have this victory, a victory that is minor and clearly based on agreements, shows that the relationship between the government and actual ulterior or superior interest is one of service, sublimation, supplication. They can't deliver on anything except for deception, management of decline, population control. This government is not delivering on a mandate to the people. Hi, you guys really wanted this and we're going to do that. We need to have it. That is not what we're living in, is it? We can't continue to ignore our slide into dystopia.
Speaking in direct contradiction to what his own
I know, I hear you. I hear you. I'm speaking for the president. I'm saying that he has said that he does not believe a border wall is effective.
The press secretary of the president says he doesn't believe it's effective. So either they're building a wall that they don't think is effective, or they're lying, or they're building a wall they don't believe in. There's nothing here except the revelation of total chaos. We're seeing this continually in the reporting around the war, the escalation of the war while denying that there is a war. We're seeing it throughout the pandemic period, revelations of the efficacy and even injuries caused by certain medical products denied. We're living in a kind of deliberate chaos. I wonder sometimes if we're in a kind of snow globe of madness that prevents us finding just some root of veracity to guide us, some sort of principle of, right, what is it we can rely on now?
And late today, this from the DHS secretary traveling in Mexico City.
There is no new administration policy with respect to the border wall.
Still, it comes after the president repeatedly slammed the wall and former President Trump during the campaign.
There will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration.
I don't think I'd ever say this, but Joe Biden actually looked younger before the election, didn't he? You know that famous thing of like president's age in office? Joe Biden, I didn't think like, that guy was really sprightly when he was campaigning. But look at him there. Looks like Chris Hemsworth compared to how he looks now.
Tonight, Mr. Trump arguing he's been proven right, posting there are only two things that have consistently worked: wheels and walls. Will Joe Biden apologize to me and America for taking so long to get moving? The latest NBC News poll shows Americans give Republicans an 18-point advantage when asked who would better handle immigration.
That wall was a symbol for Trump. It was a symbol of a clear, vivid image of American interests prioritized over global interests, you could argue. It was a symbol for Biden, his point of difference from Trump. And now what is it a symbol of? Deception, corruption, ineptitude, dishonesty, all of them? Let's get into it. Joe Biden has changed course on building a border wall as the US struggles to cope with a surge in migrant arrivals. Surge is a word we didn't used to hear much. Surges in pandemic spikes, surges in migration. Curious. The United States has a right and a duty to secure its borders and protect its people against threats, President Joe Biden said in a proclamation the day he was inaugurated in 2021. But building a massive wall that spans the entire southern border is not a serious policy solution. It's a waste of money that diverts attention from genuine threats to our homeland security. The argument that's used when politicians change their mind, the only argument that could ever make sense, is that there's been an evolution in policy based on an altering and evolving reality. But that only works if there's an ongoing dialogue, doesn't it? Unless you see Joe Biden say, I know I said this, but now we're doing that because of this. Unless you have that as a component. Remember during the pandemic, people said, yeah, but at the beginning, we thought lockdowns were effective. Yeah, but at the beginning, it seemed that this medication would be effective. But do you note how there was never a public addressing of the changing of the idea? Just a gentle seeping out of facts. Just a gentle dissipation of policy. No one ever said we were wrong about that, did they? Up to 20 miles of barrier will be built in Stark County, Texas, despite campaign pledges from the president not to erect another foot of wall along the border with Mexico. Democrats have been fiercely critical of Donald Trump's use of executive powers to build a barrier on the southern border. But now Mr. Biden is using the same powers to try to staunch the flow of migrants along a section of the frontier, which according to official data has seen 245,000 illegal entries in the past year. The move comes as officials in Democrat-controlled Chicago and New York have admitted they are unable to cope with the rising number of migrants arriving in their cities. It seems like a rather divisive form of representation to wait until it's Democrat-controlled cities before making amendments. Also, the issue of migration appears to be spoken about on a number of different levels. In some places you hear rhetoric that is based on compassion and unity and support, and then the general policy shift seems to be towards accepting that you can't have limitless migration because it destabilizes nations. So again, like with COVID, when are these shifts taking place and where is the conversation around it? We used to say this, now we're doing that. In the absence of that kind of open discourse, I think what you have is a kind of a bewilderment and a kind of chaos and an untethering of like, what is it we're supposed to believe now? What is it we're doing? What is it we voted for? Because you're not doing what you said you were going to do. Mr. Biden is also under pressure from voters to act, with a Washington Post ABC poll last week showing that 62% of Americans disapprove of his handling of the crisis at the US-Mexico border. The president has insisted that his position hasn't changed and that his hands were tied by Congress. We had no choice, Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas said at a press conference Thursday. It was mandated by law. But in defying over 24 laws, including environmental rules, to resume the wall, a stark reversal of his definitive campaign and presidential promise, the president has opened himself up to withering criticism from allies and gloating from the MAGA crowd. If it was mandated by law and they have no choice, how come they're able to overturn those other laws, particularly environmental rules that they campaign around and claim to care about? In a sense, I'm not even offering you an evaluation on whether or not there needs to be a wall. It doesn't seem to be something I'm particularly qualified to offer you. What I feel that we are able to discuss on our channel is the evident deception, lying, gerrymandering, manipulative language that is accompanying this issue and a lack of discourse and conversation. If it's mandated by law, then how come you can break the other laws? What are your priorities around the environment? Do you remember the East Palestine rail crash? That was an environmental disaster. No one did anything about it. Remember Hawaii money when it was clear that there needed to be emergency funding. They didn't do anything about it. How could anyone continue to ignore the obvious fact that there's just an exercise in deception, manipulation, propaganda, lying? In fact, that's almost all it is. What else is it other than that? The Democrats who demonize President Trump for his focus on stopping illegal immigration and characterize his quest to build such a barrier as racism have been mugged by reality. That's a very good phrase, because now you have to shift all of the rhetoric and perception around what the wall represents. Now it represents something that's mandated by law, something that's absolutely necessary. So what did that mean then? This was actually the symbolic issue of the campaign. Those that wanted that wall were racists or lunatics or extremists. Those that didn't want it were said to be, by the legacy media, compassionate, tolerant, progressive. So now the wall is happening anyway. How do we make this shift? How do we adjust? Oh, so what? A wall is needed then? Yeah, because it's mandated. But what about the laws you're ignoring? Oh yeah, there's sort of a different type of law. So what did it mean when you were saying those people were racist? What this tells us with stark clarity, as lurid and as obvious as a 50-foot wall dividing a country, is that you can't trust anything that they say. That there's no meaning, no truth, no honesty, no goodwill behind the words of the government and those that amplify them in legacy media. We're sort of participating in a chaotic and deceptive game where it seems that part of the function of media and government is to maintain a state of disorientation and deception. So it's very difficult to know what's real and what's not real, what's right and what's not right anymore. If an administration that would have rather done anything than complete construction of Trump's wall is now going ahead with the project, that tells us all we need to know about their hypocrisy and the bankruptcy of their policies. Even if they won't admit they were lying when they called Trump a racist for wanting a wall, their actions speak louder than their words. We're going to have to leave that here on this platform. To see the video in its entirety, join us on Rumble, where we report every day at 12 Eastern Time. Also, become an Awaken Wonder if it's within your means, and you can support our content and you get access to all sorts of fantastic other stuff. More important than any of that, though, is if you can, please stay free.